Welcome to the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John Tulac.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Professionals of the Inland Empire, which we affectionately call PI. I'm John Tulac, international business attorney located in Claremont. It's my privilege to host this podcast every week with really distinguished business professionals who live and work in the Inland Empire. Today, we're going to do a little bit of variation on the PI theme. And so this is professionals in enterprise or entrepreneurship that we're going to do today with my very special guest and friend, Jay Prag, who, as many of you may know, if you've been listening regularly to the Lou Desmond and Company show, is a guest on Thursday. He is a distinguished professor and teacher at CGU at the Ito and Drucker Management Center. And we're going to talk today in the same format, conversational, but we're going to focus on a specific topic, and we're going to focus on this in terms of the impact it has on you, the business person, because like it or not, the world happens, and sometimes things that happen in the world cause really nasty things with a ripple effect to small, medium, and large-sized companies here in the Inland Empire. So Jay, welcome back to PI, and here we go. So we're going to talk about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and what's happening in the oil patch today, and how that has impacts, mostly negative so far, but not entirely, on the U.S. economy. So Jay, what do you think? From the standpoint of an economist and looking at all the things that you teach in let's start with macroeconomics, price and scarcity and so on. What does this look like to you?
Well, its primary impact is in the oil market. It's the largest single supply change. So much oil that is produced not particularly by Iran, but by the countries that are bottled up in the by the Straits of Hormuz. Kuwait, in particular, is rather stuck, as well as a lot of production from Saudi Arabia and other countries. And I don't know what best estimates, John, if you go to pre-conflict, maybe as much as 20% of the world's oil market has been disrupted. Not very much that's directly related to the US, but all of it goes into the same international supply and demand diagram. So, US producers aren't going to sell domestically at a price substantially lower than they could sell internationally. So prices go up everywhere. It's the nature of the economic beast. And we've seen it at the pump, a full dollar a gallon higher, maybe a little more than that, depending on where you buy, since this started. And that's the most direct effect that most people see. And that's, of course, our cost of going somewhere, cost of tourism, which is a big part of Southern California. And then the logistics industry has got to be hating life right now, to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is about 20% of the world's oil and gas that has to transit the strait. And of course, that is historically known as a bottleneck. Any number of things besides a war can cause disruptions there that are temporary, same as the Suez Canal. And we had the ship that sunk a couple of years ago that bottlenecked that corridor for a while. And this goes to something that I preach is the need for companies to have resilience. You can't just be a sole source reliant on a single supplier or a single place in the world because bad things can happen, just as we're seeing now. And then what do you do? If you don't have a plan B, you're in a lot more hurt than if you do have a plan B.
Well, this is a little bit like what's the Yogi Berra line, deja vu all over again. We talked about this during COVID. We talked about the supply chain disruptions because of COVID, and then after that, because of some of the problems that the administration was having dealing with China and other things, and that was when every company that was rethinking their strategy should have started looking for plan Bs for everything they bought. Once you get fool me once, a curse on you, fool me twice, a curse on me. That's when everybody should have started looking for plan Bs. Here, the good news, of course, as you know, John, is that all of the suppliers that are bottled up are looking for plan Bs now. So there's stuff being trucked out and piped out and moved out in every way, shape, or form other than through the Straits of Hormuz. And again, this is one of those things where it's going to be more expensive, it's more problematic, but in the long run, the only real loser is going to be Iran. In the long run, once you have your alternatives figured out, you're never going to be, you can't hold them hostage ever again. So, it's problematic right now, won't be problematic forever. This isn't like the OPEC oil embargo. It's not even remotely like that. But for a little while, when you have to redo a supply chain that was well thought out and cost effective, with a plan B is always more expensive than plan A, right? That's the nature of it.
It usually is, and of course, lawyers are risk averse, so we will preach resiliency more than efficiency, and it's a balance that has to be struck. And you look at what this war has accomplished, you know, degrading Iran's capability to inflict pain on the world by acquiring a nuclear weapon. You compare that with a temporary surge in gasoline prices, and war always has a price that has to be paid. But that's a pretty decent price to pay for something that's essential. I mean, it's existential to Israel, but every country in the Mideast can thank us for this intervention, and by extension, the rest of the world. It seems to me a small price to pay. That's not much comfort, though, to somebody who's feeling like I'm paying more of that price, whether it's because they were unprepared or they're in a market where they're particularly impacted by a disruption in supply.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. History is a good teacher, but sometimes the lessons are hard to see. Um, if Neville Chamberlain had gone to visit you know who way back before World War II started, and instead of signing what turned out to be a completely useless non-aggression agreement or whatever he wanted to call it, if instead he shot Hitler in the head, the world would have been a much, much better place, as it turned out. But nobody would have known that when he did it, right? I mean, to some extent, it's only years later that a dramatic um, show of force that changes the direction of the whole region. It's only years later that anybody's going to realize what a good thing that was.
Exactly. And although there was intel at the time that was available, it wasn't the kind of detail that we expect from our intelligence communities today to be able to gather. But
Yeah,
Hitler was bluffing. It's like, I will push this until I'm pushed back because I wasn't really ready yet.
yeah.
And the only one who seemed to know that well was Churchill,
Who
who
wasn't in power at the time.
it was not in power at the time.
Yeah,
Exactly. And it was actually really on the outs with his own party, even.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we're not going to listen to you, Winston.
Right.
So you can't solely rely on leadership. You can't solely rely on a political solution. So a small business, particularly a small business, can feel like being tossed at sea in a small boat, right? What can I do? Again, it goes to knowing your supply chain, and
Yeah,
if whether it's sole source or not. If you're buying through a distributor, where's the distributor getting those goods that are being sold to you that you're now using either as component parts or stocking your shelves in a retail location?
yeah.
You have to know where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, and I imagine, and who knows where stuff that's produced here ends up getting sold around the world. But if you look at the disruption in trade overall, there were ships coming out of the straits that carried oil and oil-related things, helium and the other things that happen around where oil is. Then there were a lot of ships going in carrying everything else in the world, right? Because these are countries that have next to nothing, sold oil and bought everything else. And that all got disrupted too. And that too reverberates through world markets where if you are in an industry that has lost a major customer, that's a problem, right? You all of a sudden have excess supply of goods and no second customer for some of them. No second customer with the wealth that a Kuwait or a Saudi Arabia have, you know? So there, the disruption is a two-way disruption. And again, that's problematic for every company on the, in the world.
Exactly. And again, you try to diversify your market. I have always been a proponent of a U.S. company diversifying and broadening the marketplace by finding overseas customers. I mean, that's where the bulk of the world customers for most goods are going to be. Now, Vegemite in Australia, yeah, and the rest of the world doesn't like that very much.
It's
Yeah,
pretty.
so maybe there are U.S. companies with a Vegemite type product, but most things can be sold somewhere else.
Mhm.
And the Middle East has a lot of money. So, overlooking that market is generally a mistake. So I want to look at one example of resiliency, and that's in Qatar, where they are putting more and more growth of crops under greenhouses. So
Mhm.
they have more greenhouse space under acreage than virtually every other country in the world. There might be one other one that rivals that. So their goal is to be self-sufficient in food.
There is one other, and it's the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the single biggest greenhouse, but a similar sized country with a similar climate. It's similar climate in that it's too cold and wet to grow most of the time, as opposed to too dry and sunny. But it's still not moderate, which is yeah. So interesting. I didn't know that they were Qatar was number two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same idea. And again, there's a lot. If you sacrifice some of your efficiency and getting the best price in order to have assurance of supply or assurance of delivery, again, every firm has to find that balance. But let's look at another ripple effect, and that is that a lot of our chemical fertilizer is petroleum based. Urea is made from gas primarily coming out of the Mid East, and a substantial amount of that goes, to the developing world where they absolutely need it. Some of it comes to the United States, although we produce a lot of our own urea and other chemical fertilizers. But when there's a shortage, as there is now, even U.S. farmers are negatively impacted by that because the price goes up everywhere.
Or not, as you said earlier, right? Because if our markets are a little more flexible in terms of available fertilizer and also just technologically probably the most advanced agricultural sector in the world, that's higher crop prices for our farmers to take advantage of. So that, as it turns out, might be a sector that gets an unexpected benefit from this, possibly.
Possibly. And also, one of the other benefits that may come out of this is that there are alternatives to the caustic chemical fertilizers, and urea is the worst in terms of being environmentally unfriendly. And over time, its impact on the soil and crops is such that you keep having to put more and more on it to get the same yield. So these soil enhancement products, some of which are just entirely organic, now have an opening where especially the big fertilizer producers say, "Ah, you don't want to use that stuff, or if you use that stuff, we're not going to sell you our stuff." That kind of dominance can be undercut by simply the need of the farmer. Say, "I need to, I don't have as much money to put into urea at the current price, so maybe I'll try something else
Yeah.
to help my crops grow."
And there are maybe perhaps benefits to Inland Empire businesses, or at least businesses that are starting to grow here. I know that because of the LA Olympics, there's a lot of activity around the city of Riverside carbon-free transportation modes, because the LA Olympics has promised a lot of that, trams and trains and this, that, and the other. And they've been able to attract companies from all around the world to open manufacturing and related facilities in and around Riverside. And if it turns out that gas prices are high and stay high for a long period of time, that will certainly push more people towards alternatives. If it turns out we have some homegrown alternatives, sometimes good luck, just sort of falls in your lap. That would be great. I don't think we have any Inland Empire micronuclear companies. Would that we did. It's certainly a space that I think is a coming thing. But there are businesses that have always been able to take advantage of shocks and price changes. And as you said, those that are well positioned will find a way to make something good out of at least some of this.
Exactly. And of course, whenever you have an increase in costs over here, on the left, it makes you start looking at your other costs on the right because you see where can I trim some sales or cut some costs. And you know, it, companies should do that on a regular basis anyhow, but inertia usually creeps in and it's just like why do I have six streaming services? I don't even watch anything on this channel
Yeah.
anymore. You can end up with costs that you forget about,
Yeah.
those little ones that keep adding up. So sometimes something like this is a good stimulus to do the whole review. Again, we look for the silver linings in these kinds of situations because they're always there. They're just not always readily apparent.
Yeah. The world events are always such a challenge to analyze because nobody sane enjoys the idea of war, enjoys the idea of um, people, military or not, being killed in huge numbers. We've known that Iran was going to have to be dealt with for a long time. There's never been a serious attempt on their part to be part of the most of the rest of the world as a good actor. And it was really just a question of who and when. Um, it's one of these things, as you said earlier, that I don't think, again, you never know how this is going to turn out, but I don't think the world will regret that we did this down the road. And I don't know I don't know what Xi and President Trump talked to each other about, but I don't think Xi said, "Hey, you better cut it out." I think they probably are hoping for maybe a more stable region altogether. And then, as a good friend of mine said on a radio show, they mostly just want regular sources of oil. They don't really care who it's from. They really don't. And at the end of the day, stability is a good thing for the world economy, and stability generally means good actors. Not to say that we're always a good actor, Israel's always a good actor, others, but Iran's almost never a good actor.
I can't recall the last time it has been
Yeah,
for anything.
yeah. So
The China connection is important to note because it certainly needs a lot of oil. And one thing I think took place before the summit is that Trump assured Xi that there's going to be an assurance of supply,
yeah,
even though we have to cut off Iran. We intervened in Venezuela, and there's oil now available for China again from Venezuela. It's just under new management somewhat.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the assurance that we won't play the oil card if you won't play the rare earth card is just good old-fashioned horse trading.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that because we had an ally that was probably more under threat than we were in Israel, the Iran thing happened. If we could, as a country that all of a sudden seems to want to be the world's policeman, we would probably go stabilize Mexico because their oil industry is big and very underutilized. It's such economically a messy country that they rarely get to take advantage of the resources that they've got. So having changed directions in Venezuela, and then if you look at the other large oil producer in the world that's not all that stable, I don't think we can do much in Nigeria. Very big oil producer, pretty messed up country in lots of ways. But yeah, if we could create some change just south of the border and in terms of stability, the oil market could stabilize fairly easily without ever reopening the straits, you know?
Yeah, well, that's true because there is plenty of oil in the world, but it's heavy, it's bulky, therefore expensive to move. So the logistics play a key role, and that's one of the areas here in the Inland Empire, one of the industries where we have real experts
Yeah.
that
Well,
could
and you
assist
no
in
doubt
that.
heard about the attempt on one of the provinces of Canada to separate. It wasn't so they could have rodeos. It's because they have oil, and they wanted to be a bigger player on world oil markets than the federal
Right.
Canadian government would allow.
And now the Canadian government, even a very liberal Canadian government, has seen the economic wisdom of,
Surprise, surprise.
we need to be doing a better job for
Having
our oil
promised their
production.
entire country free health care, they do have to find a way to pay for that sort of stuff.
Yes. And
Yeah.
oil is one way of doing that. We would bring a lot more oil from the tar sands in Alberta in if we had the Keystone Pipeline and some other things. It makes economic sense for Canada to build a pipeline to their western port and getting it out to China too, which I expect would happen. So
Mhm.
going back to Mexico and opportunity there, if you're in logistics, Mexico has serious logistics problems with respect to moving oil, among other goods. Secondly, if you happen to have technology that would serve the energy sector, whether that's in electric power or in oil and gas, Mexico can use your products and services. And you get a good deposit up front and engage in sound business practices and get paid in dollars. And you can have very good customers. Oil, and the refineries in Mexico are all a mess. The newest one still isn't fully functioning properly, and the old ones are all ready to explode.
Yeah, it's very
They,
funny. The government nationalized all of their oil industry. It was working reasonably well when it was under corporate control, with all the crap going on around it. And then the government nationalized it, and that basically took care of it. They
like Pemex is the only oil company in the world that consistently loses money every.
almost impossible to do.
Yeah, which takes some doing and say, I'm sorry, but you don't get credit terms, Pemex. You pay up front. And Mexican companies in the oil patch don't understand that. It's like we don't get credit, so we've got to pay for goods and services up front. Mexico, surprisingly, to a lot of people, but this is true. You have a lot of very sophisticated business people with very successful businesses in a variety of sectors, and they are now investing in the United States, and they
Yeah.
particularly like to invest in Southern California. So again, another area of synergy potential is, if you're looking for money, look south of the border for investors. Don't just think that you're going to find those investors in the old backyard because we don't have venture capitalists.
That's absolutely right. It's one of the saddest situations in the world, and with all the brouhaha over illegal immigration and things like that, to take a step back and think about why so many people want to get out and come here. It's a wonderful country with all kinds of resources and hardworking, wonderful people who just live under the threat of death constantly in large swaths of their country. Famous beach resorts are now shooting galleries. It's just terrible. And I don't know what can be done about it, but we were the country that got the benefit of an awful lot of good, hardworking people for a long time, from their destable government and system. But yeah, boy, if you could find a way to crack it's a regional thing. But yeah, the connections over the border with well-run businesses are still great profit centers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very important part of the international economy that there is a flow of people from one place to the other. You go where the opportunity is. The significant difference is there's a process for that, a legal
Correct.
process for that
Correct.
just totally fell apart here uh, between Mexico and the United States. And honestly, with getting the folks that we should be getting out of this country, we also should be looking for ways to bring in the necessary people with the skills and the degrees and the services that we absolutely need, that for one reason or another our existing population isn't filling.
Well, and again, a whole nother show, perhaps the next time we get together. But um, the pendulum swung severely in one direction in terms of open borders, de facto open borders, and then severely in the other direction in Trump Part Two. I think we've seen how that looks. It looks untenable on both sides. It looks socially horrible on the Trump side, but it was completely unstable when it was de facto open borders. But yeah, we have a lot of unfilled positions here, and there are a tremendous number of people who assimilate very quickly here because guess what? They know people here that we'd love to have. I'd love to have them in my classroom. You'd love to have them as clients. Yeah, we have to get back to something that looks like sensible immigration policy. It's almost required. And again, we have to get back to something that looks like centrist government in this country. I'm not sure when or who, but that's got to involve something that looks like sensible immigration policy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that almost without exception, people are saying this is what we want, and we're not getting it from either party right now, and that's a problem. And this is the segue to talking about what Jay and I are seeing for a future podcast. So we're going to preview this for you a little bit. Law and economics go hand in hand in a lot of ways. We look at some of these things in the same way from our different fields of view, and also there are some significant differences. And so putting these two together will help business people identify problem areas that can be addressed so that they don't become problems. So it's a matter of foreseeing, forecasting, in a way from the economist's perspective and applying sound principles of economics to your business, and the preventive law approach of let's stay out of trouble from the get-go if you're going to undertake something new as opposed to solving a problem afterwards. So those two things go very well together. And it leads to a third area that we talked about a little bit here at the end, and that's policymaking. Because we don't exist in a vacuum as we're doing business. It is not anarcho-capitalism in this country. We have to deal with the political side of things that come from policy making. And business people have an opportunity to influence policy making, not always successfully, but lobbyists succeed, and small business needs to have a voice as well, both at the local level, where you can go to a city council meeting, right? Or lobbying your congressperson or senator by writing a letter and saying, I don't like this or I want that. And so the whole idea of our upcoming podcast is to showcase typical issues and problems facing businesses and what an economist and a lawyer can suggest by way of solutions. What do you think
Well,
of that?
and John and I had met each other probably a dozen times in the past, but got to know each other on Lou's show and worked together as part of a threesome when Lou was there, but as a twosome when he wasn't. And we found that we had very good chemistry. If you hear a lawyer and an economist, your first thought is, I'm turning that off. But John is a wonderful lawyer, a very broad thinker, knows a lot of stuff. All my trivia is basically easy for him. And then, the thing that I always like when I give a talk, and John's seen many of my talks, is somebody will invariably come up and say, "You're not like other college professors, are you?" And they mean that as a compliment. Um, I revel in my ability to teach things, to talk about things, to connect back to my roots in a very small town back on the eastern shore of Maryland, where I don't tell people I'm a college professor because they don't know what that is. I just tell them I teach. And I love analyzing problems and coming up with possible solutions, but making them seem straightforward, easy to understand. That's my skill. I'm the International Teacher of the Year award winner at my school. I won my 37th one on Saturday, John. That's what I do.
Congratulations.
And I think John and I will have a very good time bringing a fresh set of views, sometimes shared, sometimes not, to a lot of issues and a lot of problems that are out there for the Inland Empire, for California, and looking at the country and the rest of the world.
And I'm excited to be doing that with you, Jay, for the reason that you just suggested. It is not easy to teach higher education today in higher education, and you excel at it. Your style and your approach make it understandable to your students that they want more, and that same style will definitely play well in terms of serving the business community, which is something that historically you've done only kind of indirectly in an academic role, but the consultant in you is ready to bust out all over, and we want to take advantage of that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get a John and Jay show. We'll probably come up with a different title than that because the business community would probably want that, but we want to be able to bring you solutions to the things that you're facing in your everyday business lives. So that's going to be the whole idea of this upcoming podcast. Final thoughts, Jay.
I'm very excited about this. My life at this point, I've been teaching for 40 years and I love doing that. And I want to do fun things with my friends and just help people sort out the problems in the world, or at least give them ways to think about it. And nice and balanced, right? We have no interest in pandering to the left, the right, any of the above. We are, if your last name were Matic, we'd be pragmatic, and that's what we are going to be.
Indeed, that's a really good way to say that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening. So long for now.
Thanks for watching or listening to, depending on the case, the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John W. Tulac. If you have a suggestion for a guest, email him at jwtulac, that's JWTULAC @gmail.com. jwtulac @gmail.com.